Today's episode is inspired by a teacher that I was talking to a couple of months ago. She said, Jocelyn, no one at my school knows I'm Jewish. I just don't know how it would be received. From what I can see, everyone is Christian, and all the activities and the events at our school line up that way. They line up to the Christian faith. She also added that she knows that there are some students that don't identify in some of the quote traditional ways according to the school, but they are struggling to show up authentically because the culture is not very welcoming. She makes it a point to support those students because she knows what it feels like to kind of hold a piece of who you are, an important piece of who you are back. Now, there are a lot of things that I could say about this particular story. And honestly, I will be sharing more in another episode. But for today, I want to focus on the fact that this teacher didn't feel comfortable sharing her Jewish faith. So, how on earth can we expect students to feel comfortable showing up authentically in a space where it's not very welcoming, where the teacher doesn't even feel comfortable? I actually had a few very similar realizations about the way that our schools are set up, and they're set up in a way that doesn't necessarily or is not very like welcoming all the time of other faiths. And here's what I mean by that, right? So like take for example the school calendar. It is structured to honor the Christian faith and to reserve time to celebrate Christian holidays. So it's kind of no wonder that people, different students, feel uncomfortable sharing their faith authentically. And I say this as someone who is Christian. I identify as a Christian. But like, unless you're teaching at a faith based school, then our calendar, our public school calendar, is really just rooted in tradition. There is no evidence to support that students need to break, right? That there's like a benefit to them breaking at those particular times throughout the year. There's nothing that says we can't slide the dates a little bit to the left, slide them a little bit to the right. There's no evidence of us having to keep the dates exactly where they are. Anyway, I digress. Another realization that I had from teaching at schools where the majority population were BIPOC students was that all practicing Jews do not look like the mainstream image that we see on television. I know, bananas, but look, we all have our light bulb moments at different times. So let's just give each other a little grace, okay? But this also made me think of the famous jazz musician, singer, trumpet player, Louis Armstrong. He was raised in New Orleans. And when he was younger, he actually lived with a Jewish family for a number of years and he worked with them and worked for them. So as an adult, he wore a Star of David to honor them and to honor their kindness toward him. That type of stuff just like it just gives me life. It gives me energy to think about how this family welcomed him in. They shared meals, right? They broke bread with him. And he was so impacted by the lessons that he learned that he wanted to continue to honor them for the rest of his life. What a great opportunity, right? What a great lesson in the possible opportunities that we have to connect with people and to be able to honor each other in our differences, but how those moments of honoring our differences can cause lifelong connection and can lead to a lifelong impact. So, how can we, as educators, how can we be more intentional about honoring our Jewish students and their faith, even if we don't know that they are Jewish? I've got a few ideas. First, if you have a student facing calendar in your classroom, in the school, it is important to include important dates for the Jewish faith. So it's not just important because, okay, here it is, I'm doing this, right? Like I'm putting it there, Jocelyn, it's marked. No, it's important because it's a visual reminder for you as you're planning your lessons and as you're thinking about creating an environment that is welcoming and inclusive. But it's also something that might encourage questions, student led questions, and conversations in your classroom. Another learning environment, another learning opportunity. Marking the calendar is also a great reminder to be sensitive to the fact that these dates mark important times for the Jewish community. These are times when people may desire quiet, individual moments of reflection, or they might enjoy gathering together to celebrate, to break bread, to laugh. And if there is school on that day, it might not be possible. So if a guardian chooses to keep their student home that day, a couple of days, that might be a great time for you to sit down with your team of teachers or with administration and create a plan that honors rather than punishes the student's desire to want to celebrate their faith. For myself as a Christian, the school calendar is designed to affirm me and my beliefs. I don't have to request time off. I don't have to have this fear of missing important information because everyone is off when I am off. So let's keep that at the forefront of our mind, right? How can we create not only an inclusive, but an equitable opportunity for students to be able to celebrate and honor their faith in the way that they choose? One important date to place on the calendar is Hanukkah. Many people are aware of Hanukkah, but honestly, I don't know if our students know the actual dates. Having that visual reminder for you, right? But also like this visual like marker will allow them to see that different people are celebrating in different ways at the very same time of the year that they're celebrating things, right? It's like, hey, it's not all about you. Yes, we are all breaking for winter break, often known as Christmas break. But for your students that are Jewish, it is Hanukkah break, right? So having our students be more aware of the fact that, wow, we're all taking time off, but everybody is celebrating in a different way. And maybe some people aren't celebrating a religious holiday at all, but that's a conversation for another episode. Another great holiday to mark on the calendar is Rosh Hashanah and also Yom Kippur. So Rosh Hashanah means head of the year. This is celebrated as the Jewish New Year, and it begins a 10-day period of repentance and reflection that ends with Yom Kippur. This is a fantastic opportunity to talk about new years, new beginnings, and to give your students an opportunity for reflection. So that takes me to my second suggestion, which is to recognize Rosh Hashanah and to honor the time of reflection in your class. It is important that our students have time to reflect. So even though they may not be Jewish and you may not be Jewish, and you're not necessarily telling them, hey, you need to become Jewish, right? But you're just saying, this is an important time of the year for reflection as we think about new beginnings for people that identify with the Jewish faith. But we also know that reflection is important. Now, Rosh Hashanah takes place in September at different times of September, depending on the year. But by this time, depending on where you are in the world, most students have been in school for a month, maybe even more. So it's actually a perfect time to stop and have them reflect on goals that they've set for the year. Not even just for the academic year, right? But maybe behavioral goals, personal goals. I mean, it's September, but hey, there's all those other months that have already gone by. So how have they done accomplishing goals, and maybe where are some of the challenges that they've faced in accomplishing those goals? How can we support them as their teachers, as their librarians, as their administrators? How can we support our students in accomplishing those goals? But if we don't know what they are, we can't support them. So this is a great way to honor this time where students that are practicing the Jewish faith can intentionally think about how they need to be repenting and also reflecting so that they can dive deeper into their faith, right? But you're doing that, you're holding this space for them even without knowing. One activity that I love is having my students intentionally reflect on and then revisit their power word for the year. I've got this great done for you resource that is filled with 7 collaborative and a few independent thinking activities that help students to understand the importance of words. It allows students to begin to understand how different cultural markers can impact the words that we know, the words we use, and the words we value. So this resource, you can grab it in my teacher's store. It's got 23 student response pages. It's got a PowerPoint guided lesson. It's got a bulletin board project. All these things are print and teach, and you can use them throughout the year so that your students can have a really robust, reflective experience. And you can use them at times like this when you want to make sure that you're honoring holidays like Rosh Hashanah and honoring your students who may or may not identify as Jewish by giving them this quiet time to reflect. My third suggestion is, drum roll, feature books in your classroom. Yep, you already knew I was going to say it. You already knew. But let's also think about it this way. We want to feature books in our classroom that have Jewish protagonists. And also, the Holocaust was it was a devastating, traumatic, horrible time in our history. But it is not the only important event and does not fully encompass who Jewish people are. We want to share stories of joy for the Jewish community and the Jewish faith. So yes, you can have some books about the Holocaust, but let's also make sure that we are sharing a diverse range of stories about Jewish people and how they show up in this world. I recently put together a list of recommended books. They are for kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade that feature Jewish main characters. And as I was doing the research to put together this list, I was energized. Like literally, I was given life by seeing the diversity of stories that are available for students to read. Like seriously, there were a couple of books that featured biracial and bi-ethnic children. So a student who has a white Jewish mother and a Black father, or a student who has a Chinese parent and then also an English Jewish parent. Like literally, the stories blew my mind. I was so energized and really excited to be able to recommend these books because we want to make sure that we are showing a full picture to the best of our ability, right? Like I said, I did not necessarily realize that Jewish people physically looked any different than what I had seen just on television. So imagine for our students, they definitely are not thinking, oh yeah, Jewish students, Jewish children can show up physically looking in a variety of different ways. So you can get this, you can check out this list of recommended books by going to bookshop.org. Bookshop.org. I will make sure I link that in the show notes, and then just search custom teaching solutions. So that way you can see all of the books. And along those same lines, I want to encourage you to also think about your movie selections. So when we are preparing to break for a holiday, often there is a party and there is a movie that is viewed. I would encourage you to not only feature movies that maybe showcase Christmas, but to also show movies that talk about Hanukkah. Let's make sure that our movie selection is inclusive and welcoming and is one that is going to allow students to continue to learn about themselves and maybe the things that they were not aware of, but then also to learn about their peers and the people in this beautiful, beautiful world that we live in. Now, these were just three quick ideas, right? Make sure that your calendar is inclusive. Make sure that you are honoring your Jewish students by allowing for times of kind of quiet reflection during certain holidays that encourage that. And then also featuring diverse books in your classroom that have Jewish protagonists and diversifying your movie selection. So those are just three quick ideas. Imagine how a 30-minute coaching call could really elevate your students' learning experience. I mean, really think about it, right? Like you and I sitting down 30 minutes on a Zoom or a Google Meet, whichever you prefer, and we are talking specifically about your students. We're talking specifically about the resources that you have in front of you. We're talking specifically about any of your concerns, all of your victories. Right? We're talking about ways to build and to really elevate the learning experience so that all of your students can think about learning and equate it to a joyful experience. And also, when your students are experiencing this joy, you're experiencing joy, right? So go ahead, don't be shy. Book a 30-minute coaching call today so that we can take the guesswork out of creating lessons that truly spark joy for your students. Okay, my friend, I will talk with you next Wednesday.